My name is Deirdre Heck. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a member of the Welcoming Congregation Committee. Today is our Transgender Day of Visibility service, and quite apropos, our theme for spiritual contemplation this month is living love through the practice of trust. The bonds of unconditional love, a love that is inherently imbued with trust, is vital for our transgender friends and family. A beautiful quote by Leslie Feinberg from Trans Liberation, Beyond Pink or Blue. My right to be me is tied with 1,000 threads to your right to be you. We are all intertwined. Gwen Mines and Fransom Killam have graciously offered to share their stories, their threads of connections, and unconditional love with all of us. Thank you for your vulnerability, Gwen and Francis.
Hi, good morning. My name is Gwen Mines. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm going to start off by telling you 2 coming out stories, and curiously, both stories have to do with my son Charlie. Now, my son Charlie is in his mid-30s right now, but he first came out to us when he just had speech, and he told us, "I'm a boy." Now, growing up, I was a tomboy, so I just went under the assumption, okay, my kiddo was a tomboy too, and he really clung to this term, tomboy. And he was very careful every time he was introduced to somebody that he let them know that he was a tomboy. And in retrospect, it makes perfect sense to me because he definitely did not want anybody to mistake him that he was a girl. He really identified growing up with his grandfather. His grandfather did a lot of carpentry work, so his grandfather, Papa, would wear bib overalls, and back then, Oshkosh had the style where bib overalls were actually very popular. So Charlie's favorite outfit, of course, was bib overalls so that he could be like Papa. And they went around the shop together, and they loved it, had wonderful times. And in fact, Papa named Charlie his little Norm after Norm Abrams from This Old House. And that just tickled Charlie. You know, he identifies me as this guy. It was fabulous. And in fact, actually, at Jack Steiner, we happened to run into John, I can't even say it, Norm Abram, and Papa told the story, and Charlie was there, and he was just pleased and as punch, you know, with these 2 men that he so identified with. It was just really a wonderful moment. Later on, or I don't know the exact time, but in preschool we had sort of the opposite situation in that there was a special event and the girls were supposed to dress in dresses. And I was, as you can imagine, quite reluctant to tell Charlie this information, but instead he ended up calming me down and he said, like, "Mom, don't worry, we'll fool them." We'll fool them. Can you imagine? I mean, he knew then that wearing a dress was a facade. It was not any part of him whatsoever. That was kind of a funny moment, but what ended up happening a little bit later wasn't so funny. Late elementary school ended up being really difficult for him. It was a time where girls were starting to play with the girls and the guys wanted to just play with the guys. And the guys just didn't recognize him as another guy, and so he'd be, you know, poo-pooed, and he'd come home and like, you know, I don't understand why I can't play with the guys. And middle school had its own pitfalls, similarly, and he didn't feel like he was fitting in. So it wasn't unusual for me to get a phone call from the nurse's office, and surprise, surprise, it was recess time, lunchtime, where all this socialization came on. Your child is sick, it's time to pick them up. Around 4th grade, we realized that Charlie was depressed and decided to seek out counseling, and that was not a good match at all. In fact, the counselor's solution to the problem, not recognizing gender dysphoria, his solution was for Charlie to double down and be a better girl. Well, can you imagine how that was? It was just even more traumatizing for him. It was truly awful. And we did catch on, and we switched counselors, and it got a little bit better, but it didn't solve all the problems. I'm just going to take a deep breath. So fortunately, high school got a little bit better, in that he found his people. So he found the Theater Guild, and he felt, comfortable around a lot of the people in the Theater Guild. He found the Gay Straight Alliance, and recently we were having this chat, Charlie and I, and he said, yes, I was the most enthusiastic ally. Makes perfect sense. Later on, he goes to college at Kenyon College in Ohio, and he picked Kenyon for two reasons. One reason was because they have an outstanding writing program, and that really drew him. But the other reason, which we didn't recognize at the time, is that it was really far from home, and it would give him a chance to reinvent himself. So we show up at Parents' Weekend freshman year, we go to his class, and interestingly, one of the professors addresses our kiddo as Charlie. And my husband and I kind of look at each other like, Charlie, this is the first time we've heard Charlie be called Charlie. And this is interesting. So his friends are calling him Charlie. And so later over the course of the weekend, he tells us, I'm sorry, but I really hate the name you gave me. It doesn't relate to me at all. I'm picking Charlie as my nickname. 2 years later, he's studying abroad at the University of Exeter in England. And towards the end of the year, he meets for the first time a trans man. I don't want to do this, but I imagine, the sky parted, a giant light bulb appeared over his head. It just all made sense to him. And so when he returned to us junior year, he had very short hair, and we again knew, okay, something's up. We'll give him time to tell us what's going on. And we didn't really have to wait very long at all. And thank God he was an English major, because what he did was that he presented us with two different books. And not only did he give us the books, he highlighted the pertinent things. And that was kind of cool for us, because not only do we hear the speech, we know about it, but we could go back and read the books and find out what it meant to him. And initially, for him, he planned to just socially transition, which means he didn't plan to have any surgery. He didn't plan to go on any hormones. That was the current plan for him. And later on, it did end up changing as he found the need. He was asthmatic. Binding was difficult for him. It was hard for him to breathe. And so as things progressed, he needed to make different changes. And actually, I think those parts were harder for me. And I was happy to have the resource of PFLAG. There's a transgender nonconforming group. And I've been a part of that group for about 10 years now. And it's been really a great place of solace for me. So his coming out was, it was hard for me on many different levels. One, at that particular time, my mom was in hospice care, and as it turned out, she passed away about 2 months after that happened, so that was pretty hard. Also, this is very common, is when your kiddos come out to you, you feel really isolated, because they've told the friends that they feel comfortable with, but they're not ready to share it with their old community right away. They're not ready to tell all of the family members. And so what you find yourself doing is you're addressing them when you see, you're addressing yourself when you see them, with one name, one set of pronouns. You're out in the world, you're using another name, another set of pronouns. And you're also aware that this is a huge secret and that this isn't going to be an easy time ahead. So it's a lot to go with. So I guess I'll kind of stop on that part of the story, but I want to also mention allies. And I am so grateful to be in this community where there are so many allies. So I just want to tell you a couple of brief stories and the difference that allies made in our life. One was the PFLAG group, and they walked us through the different things when we went hormones, this with that, and that was so supportive. But even my mom, 2 days before she passed, she had this moment of clarity, and she looked at Charlie, and she knew something changed. And she said to him, "It doesn't matter who you love." And sure, she didn't figure out that he was transgender, but Charlie was just so comforted by this, because we assumed that she thought that he was a lesbian. But he just thought, okay, this is something that she saw something different in me, and she was ready there to support me. Another thing, lucky coincidence, was that one of his friends from college's mom was a vocal coach. And since he wasn't planning to take testosterone, he wanted his voice to sound right. So she was in New York, she would Skype with him and give him different lessons. And I remember one of the lessons was to sing to the beginning of Phantom of the Opera because they kept on going down, down, down with the voice, and get your voice to go down, down. So that was really helpful. But lastly and not least was his godmother, who was truly, truly amazing. And again, a couple of these things happened before he actually came out to them, but people, knowing him, knew something had changed. And so she looks at him, and she says, I love you unconditionally. I love you unconditionally. I love you unconditionally. And whatever transformation you go through, I am there to support you. And I have to say, as a parent, it doesn't get any better than that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Frances Killam. You probably have seen me before here. Hi. So I'm going to tell a story that is more about me and my transition when Milo went through his transition. I've been a member of this church for 25 years. I brought my kids here because I wanted to have a place where they could have a moral compass, that they could grow up in a community that would provide them with that. And they did. They're fabulous adults, and I couldn't be more proud. And I joined the Welcoming Congregation Committee probably 10 or so years ago. The Welcoming Congregation Committee's job is to assist our community to be more welcoming to the LGBTQIA+ community, and also to educate as much as we can ourselves and our community about the LGBTQIA+ community and how to make them welcome. And so I've been participating in the Transgender Day of Remembrance vigil for many years. And that's the day that we read all the names of all the transgender people who died in that 1 year due to violence. And it's a very somber event. So after TDOR, about 8 years ago, Milo came to us that night, and he told us that he too was transgender. And he was really scared to admit it. And I've always been ashamed of my first response, which was that I actually had to look away from him for a minute, because in my heart I thought, I cannot add his name to that list. I can't do it. But I learned a long time ago that you may not be able to control your first response to something that you hear, but you can control your second response. And I told him that we loved him, that we were proud of him, that, we would always support him. My husband went upstairs and brought down a shirt and gave him a man's shirt. And so through the next few years, I was able to transition from a place of fear to a place of joy. I had a lot of help. I had help from this community. Milo wears his heart on his sleeve. He has no secrets. When he decided that he was out, he rang the bell downstairs and stood up on the stage and introduced himself and told everyone that he was transgender. And my community, you, gave him a standing ovation. Wow. I too, I don't know how I found the PFLAG T group that Gwen is a member of, but I joined the PFLAG T group and they helped me a lot, gave me advice about the transitioning that Milo would be going through, what it was like, the experience of being a trans man, which I knew very little about. I felt very isolated at first because I didn't know anybody with male trans children, but I met people. And one thing really stands out to me. We transferred Milo from his old high school, the Tech and the Voc in Westford, back to Chelmsford High. And when I went to register him, I talked with the registrar, the woman that writes the names in the book and tells you what you need to do next. And I said, I'm not sure how we do this, but Milo needs to be addressed as Milo. That is his name. And she said, okay, that's fine. You're a good mom. So, so I'll just end this to say that I went over this story with Milo to make sure that it was cool with him, what I was saying. And he was totally cool with it. And he just told me that when he came out to us, he felt such happiness and joy to be accepted by his family, including his fabulous sister, Abby. I'm not afraid anymore. Thank you.